Here's a good example of how you do a boost leak test on a Legacy GT. This has the EJ25 engine in it. So it's very similar, if not the same thing as the STI motor, besides the turbo is a little bit different. The turbo has this J-pipe style in the compressor housing, and this is an aftermarket intercooler that was just installed. The way the car runs, it sounds like it has a really big vacuum leak. So far, I found one before I even started doing the boost leak test, and that was down here. I ended up JB welding it because I don't know what it went to, and whatever nipple was there is broke off. If you know what that goes to, comment below so I can find out if this car needs it. The best way to do a boost leak test on this that I've found is to hook up a coupler here. I think it's 2.75 inches, and I have my boost leak tester here. These all are currently plumbed, and it would be nice to do the test with a lot of this deleted if possible, because if you don't need it, it'll eliminate you looking for something that is leaking that otherwise would just be deleted. Keep in mind that the blow-off valve is part of this test, and I prefer that it not be, but the way this intake is designed, it's really hard to deal with. So here's what it's like to go ahead and see where it's leaking. It sounds like it's leaking somewhere around here really bad, but I have to consider that the way that I'd had to do this intake, you know, it's got the blow-off valve on it, blow-off valve recirculation, and the crankcase ventilation, so I know it's leaking here, and it's leaking here at the crankcase ventilation really bad. I probably should zip tie those, but those aren't going to matter with boost anyway, because they don't see boost on these lines. These are all vacuum lines. The crankcase ventilation that runs down from here up to the top of the intake, you can't really see that. That leaks some too, but like I said, you know, those are all vacuum anyway. Really, the best way to do a boost leak test would be to put a coupler directly on the turbo. But the problem with it doing it on this one is it's so crammed in there, you can't fit a tester in there very easily. It seems like it's probably impossible because this runs across. And what we're really trying to test is that it's holding pressure from the turbo to the intercooler, and from the intercooler to the intake manifold. So the things you want to check on this is you want to check where it's bolted down. There's two gaskets here, one on this one and one on that one. And then there's two gaskets on the other side, there and there. And you have three vacuum lines back here that connect to the manifold that are kind of difficult to see. You also have one on this side that goes to the blow-off valve, and then it's also teed into something, maybe something fuel related, like the fuel pressure regulator or something. So I think I pretty much covered all the spots that could leak. Besides that, most people will probably forget to check the blow-off valve. So really you should take this off and see if your blow-off valve is leaking, because it can leak directly out of that valve. Usually it's a good idea to go with a good aftermarket one, but there's actually a lot of aftermarket ones that do leak. Even though you think you're buying something aftermarket, you think it's better, sometimes it's actually worse than the factory stuff. Just like you saw how this intercooler was leaking, this intercooler is brand new. Did not even get to take it down the road yet, and it's already leaking. So we have to try and see if we can get this intercooler exchanged for another one. I could try and JB weld it where it was leaking, which was right there. You can see there's no damage to the intercooler there, but it leaks there. As far as what I'm doing and still trying to figure out on this car, it seems like it's still leaking somewhere. And it sounds like it's leaking under here somewhere. It sounds like a vacuum leak when the car is running. So because of that, what I feel like I should do next, because I've already done the test and I'm not able to figure out where it is, I feel like I should probably make a straight pipe from the turbo back to here and delete a lot of the things that connect to this intake. That way it will eliminate all these vacuum things that most of the time don't need to be there. It'd be nice if they could be rerouted to be up here so that I knew that they wouldn't leak. So I guess I may need to change a couple things to figure out how to get this to work for a test. I think most likely try and rule out the intake pipe here and run a straight pipe to where there would definitely be no leaks with my straight pipe here. That way I could pressurize what needs to be pressurized and not pressurize something that doesn't need to be pressurized, like the crankcase ventilation. Because if you keep in mind when you're doing a boost leak test and you're pushing down the crankcase ventilation, that air is going to come directly out of the dipstick. So I do want to mention that I did change up the intake. You can see it's not bolted up here. The reason being is because I had to make my own kind of coupler system. I went off with a 90-degree coupler. I cut the coupler in half to make 245s. That was to position the intake away from the plenum here, because I don't know why it was like this. It's really complicated, I guess. Well, anyway, so we put a turbo that I made on this car. It's got a bigger inlet, and because of that, the original intake did not fit right. So I had to redo the intake to make that fit. Now, I don't know if the factory intake would have fit, but it didn't fit when I got it because the people that had worked on this car before chopped up the intake, and it definitely wasn't going to fit after that. So yeah, I made my own intake here, and then it was just this original piece. Then I put two couplers in there, but I also put 2 aluminum rings that I made on my machine so that I'd have something to grab to. So that's why the intake's completely different. When you're checking for leaks, use soapy water. It makes things a lot easier. Otherwise, you're just trying to hear for them, and you can't hear where the air is coming as easy as you can see where it's coming from. I recommend that you watch a couple of my other videos on boost leak testing. It's really important because a lot of people overlook it and don't quite understand why you need to do that. It's like you're trying to compress air into your engine, yet you're leaking most of it out, and you don't understand why your car doesn't have good response, like it doesn't spool up right. Most of the time it's actually the fact that the car cannot compress the air because it's leaking out. Keep in mind, you saw how this intercooler is leaking on this car. Most of the time when we put aftermarket parts on the vehicle and we spend a lot of money on them, we expect that they're going to work correctly. However, in this case, you can clearly see that we just spent a bunch of money on an intercooler here. This isn't my car, it's actually somebody else's. Someone else spent a bunch of money on an intercooler here, and it leaks the air out of it. So we really need to test our products, because it's clearly that the people that are selling items aren't testing them before they sell them to you. That's all for this video. Hopefully you learned something.